Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, where I interview a new person each week to get their perspective on films. And we have Sean here, who's Math Teacher Movies, who I'm a follower of on Instagram. So I'm very excited to have Sean on the show today.
Shane, thank you so much for having me, man.
Absolutely.
I have an Instagram account, Math Teacher Movies. I have a podcast with Guide the Movies on Instagram as well. It's called the Guide the Movies podcast with Joe and Sean. I also am occasionally a guest on the Silver Screen podcast, and I also have a column called Awards Watch, where I'm going over the Oscars and what's going on with the Oscars every single week. And I'll have a pretty busy column coming up on Monday, as we were discussing off mic.
Yes. Before we hopped on talking about, as we're filming this, the Golden Globe nominations came out this morning, and over the next couple of days, we're going to be getting a lot more nominations, probably from some awards shows that matter more than the Golden
Let's hope.
Globes. So at least the Golden Globes are fun. People are drunk and they have a good time.
And so are the people that vote for them, apparently.
Apparently. But I'm going to get things started with probably a question that most cinephiles get asked quite a bit. And Sean, what is your favorite film?
So my fiance always hates that when she asks me this. I can never give just a straight answer, and I give these categories of answers, and there's 15 different answers. And it's very difficult to do like a favorite film. And it's just something where some people can go right off the bat, go for it. Some people have a hard time. I would say that if I'm going to really try it out, it's going to be Mr. Smith Goes to Washington from 1939. Because I watched this film on TCM at my grandparents' house when I was in high school on a whim. Didn't really, know anything about it. I literally never heard of it. And my uncle came into the room and he's like, that's a classic. And so I said, oh, I guess it's pretty serious. My uncle thinks it's a classic. I better watch it. And so the film ended with me on my feet. And only 2 films have been able to do that. And thankfully, neither time have I been in the theater. But one was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and the other one was Whiplash. And so those are the that's quite the ending.
Before you get up on your feet, you're probably having a heart attack
the whole time.
How intense that movie is up to that point.
The whole time. It's interesting because Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a political movie, and politics have probably graced across all of our eyes in the past few years. And it is just one of those things where they don't name which party is which. They kind of do the Veep thing there. And they just talk about where the corruption is versus the little guy. And there's something very simple about it, maybe a little bit too simple. I went over political films on the Silver Screen a few episodes back, and I talked about how in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, we could see it as the ideal, amazing political thing. Well, no, he only would eventually succeed because someone else confesses, and otherwise he would have just been taken to jail. And so there's parts of it that's kind of a bummer when you really think about it. That I remember someone told me that, and it just ruined my day because I love that movie, and I still do. Jimmy Stewart is doing his Jimmy Stewartist, where he is, a very quiet, mild-mannered person who stumbles over what he's saying all the time. And then all of a sudden he becomes just the powerful, passionate person that he always thought he could be about politics. And you have Jean Arthur in there, who is just cynical and starts to, believe the idealism ever so slowly, but still has the facts behind it to work there. You have Claude Rains as the corrupt politician, which Claude Rains is just always an interesting actor because he's, of course, most people probably know him as the I'll simplify it and say cop in Casablanca. I don't know exactly what they're called there. But it is one of those things where, Claude Rains is always someone that's a little bit of a moral gray area villain, but also he still has something to fight for. And it's and then, of course, Thomas Mitchell as the drunk journalist in the stands, which
was in so many things at that time, so many movies.
Thomas Mitchell, I'll for those listening and they're like, who's Thomas Mitchell? I'll just do this right now. It's a Wonderful Life, Uncle Billy. You're welcome. And he was just in everything around then. He's just a comedic actor, a terrific drunk, really terrific drunk actor, because that's a tough thing to do. And he kind of nails it, especially in his Academy Award winning role in Stagecoach. And it's just really just all around around. Like Thomas Mitchell is just great.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the main podcasts that I usually listen to is the Cinephiles, and with Steve Morris and John Roca. And I've been going back and listening to all the podcasts from the start. And they had a podcast on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and just talking about like Jimmy Stewart was a war hero, an amazing actor, and like he had longevity from those early years with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington all the way up through Vertigo, all of like even up to The Shootist, starring in there with John Wayne. And Jimmy Stewart was such a fantastic actor, and like I love Claude Rains. It was funny. I had just rewatched The Wolfman, so like he was in quite a few of those old Universal films, and like he was Lon Chaney Jr.'s father in that, and like of course The Invisible Man. And every time I go out with my mask and my aviators on and like a hat, it's like The Invisible Man, and that's Claude Rains. And like there's so many great performances in that film, and like you want to learn what a filibuster is. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And obviously it's an interesting film to watch today with everything that's going on in terms of politics and stuff like that. So it's definitely a great pick. So I could definitely get behind that.
We talk about the iconic actor-director pairings. And everyone always just does De Niro, Scorsese, DiCaprio, Scorsese. They get into Spielberg, Hanks, Zemeckis, Hanks. And, there's a few others that are of a bit more variety. But very few can go back all the way. And we look at, Capra and Stewart. Mm-hmm. And they made some of the best. I mean, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington comes to mind. It's a Wonderful Life comes to mind. Oh boy, this one no one really knows about, and it's interesting because this is what he won the Oscar for. But You Can't Take It With You, which is like just a truly wonderful movie where Lionel Barrymore, who plays Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, plays the good-natured grandfather that doesn't really want to deal with any sort of money or business or anything, and to watch that is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, Capra. It's interesting because like Capra looked at what seemed like very idyllic. Like that idyllic kind of classic cinema, but there was a darkness. Like you watch It's a Wonderful Life, that's a dark movie. Mm-hmm. Like he wants to kill himself. Yeah. Like doesn't get a whole lot darker than that. And like Lionel Barrymore was like, for my senior thesis for college, I wrote a business education, how film has influenced our society's outlook on business. And I talked about Mr. Potter, because that's one of the big things that we look at. It's what bank people are like. They just want to take our homes. And like, there's very few positive portrayals of business people in film. And George Bailey is one of them, one of the very few. So Capra's definitely was a great filmmaker, and him and his work with Jimmy Stewart was fantastic. Absolutely. Now, Sean, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
I was trying to think about this when I saw the early ones. And, of course, Titanic comes to mind. But there was definitely things before then. I remember I fell asleep for Apollo 13, which now seems crazy. But I guess when I was that young, okay. I believe they, took me to Forrest Gump. I think I, fell between the seats of Beauty and the Beast. So I have several different sort of movie theater stories, but I do remember there was just something, as I think about all of them, there was just something iconic about The Lion King. And it was the memories I have was my mom was is actually still a professor. And at that time, still a professor at that time, I believe. But regardless, she had a schedule where she picked us up on the half days on Fridays that we would have like every month. And she would just say, do you want to go see Lion King? Do you want to go see Pocahontas? Do you want to go see that? And it was just kind of the big moment where we all knew we were good and stuff. And The Lion King was the one that I remember that it really did transfix me. The Stampede, of course, this was when they were starting to mix the hand-drawn animation with the CGI. And, some of the, CGI or the, is a 4-letter word these days, a 3-letter word, but it's something where, it's like, oh, CGI. But if you mix it properly, you'll never be able to tell, but you will be terrified beyond all belief. And the Stampede scene in The Lion King is something that I really could never remember. And I remember looking, it's kind of like the same thing as when you look at the flight attendants on a flight. For those that are only 2 years old, flights are things we take now to go to different countries. I don't know if we're ever going to do that again. But if you look at the flight attendants and you look at them being calm, you're good. I remember during the Stampede scene, I looked over at my mom and she was not calm. And she was pretty terrified. And she was probably just like, I'm bringing my kids to this. And so I think that suspense is there. And that might be my earliest memory of a movie theater, even though I talked about Beauty and the Beast, but, Lion King was definitely it.
And it's so interesting doing a lot of these interviews. Disney's been a big part of a lot of people of like our generation or around our ages that like going to the movies and getting into movies. You watch Disney, watch all those Disney animated movies, and like Lion King's great. And they decided to remake it and do it almost exactly the same movie, except
yeah, it's such a shame because when it comes to the live action remake, I say bring something new to the table, do something different. Jungle Book absolutely nailed that. Beauty and the Beast kind of did that, but I was still a little bit, okay. Aladdin brought a new style to it. I didn't necessarily love it, but I was like, okay, I see what they're doing. I think it's something like Mulan, which I really didn't like, but hey, at least they were doing something different. But when you look at the few that were just, carbon copies, and Lion King was one of them, it's such a shame. And because it's beautiful, and it is beautiful, but so is the animated version. And, I guess I'll be a purist on that. And so is the animated version. And it is so funny that, yeah, you look at people, around our age, and Disney was like our first experience somewhere. And it's so unbelievable how close to hell Disney was in the 80s. Like it was bad for them. And the movie that saved it, and I listened to the Blank Check podcast and heard about this, was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Is when they made that deal with Warner Brothers. They got everybody together, and all of a sudden they put Disney on the map again. At that exact same time, Little Mermaid was coming out, and so they were able to bring Little Mermaid up into the upper echelon. And that Little Mermaid was the one that turned it around again. And then through the 90s, we look at the glory days of Disney hand-drawn animation, and they have their dips and their dives. They did even after all those 90s movies where they were into computer animation, but then they had to battle with Pixar, which just got weird. And then you didn't know which one was which. And now there's sort of a decent split between the two. You sort of know where they both are. I'm someone that thought Raya and the Last Dragon was going to be a Pixar movie. It is just a Disney animation, but then you throw Frozen and Moana in there, and it's like, okay, they're back on there. They're perfect. They're never going to die, really.
It's one of those moments where you're like, crap, it's a new Disney animated movie. I have to check, is this Pixar or is this just Disney? Where it's just like, got to double check this. Because, like, honestly, that was the thing. Because, like, if I didn't, like, I knew Frozen 2 coming out, that's Disney animation. I know Toy Story 4 coming out, that's Pixar. And then all these new films, I'm like, is Soul a Pixar movie? And having to like actually check that now because they're both putting out quality films. And that's great. And I know, shameless plug here, but one of the Instagram pages that I follow, Magic of Film, is doing a top animated film of all time tournament right now. So a lot of these films are in that. So go check out that page. It's pretty cool. But in terms of, talked about favorite film, and it's interesting, Sean, because you brought up like thinking about like different categories and stuff like that. But do you have a particular favorite genre of film that you're drawn to?
I'm going to sound like an idiot, but it's the same thing as figuring out a favorite film. It is really the same kind of deal. Although I look at it and, I could be the loser that says drama, but I can't really say drama. I think sci-fi can get very interesting, and there's just so many avenues you can go down. I think, crime thriller always works out very nicely. I would say I really enjoy, and it has to be a good one, is a good dark comedy. And when I say a good one, you really have to, like make yourself question what you have been, what you are doing, the kind of the kind of person you are. And that's the kind of dark comedy. The one thing I can think of is World's Greatest Dad, which was R.I.P. Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And man, did this movie, and it's so great because the trailer doesn't give anything away. They only show the first act, which is just wildly great. And you are questioning the type of person you are. You are questioning the type of way society is. And a dark comedy, people just mess it up as just like, oh, you're making jokes that are offensive, or you're making jokes about there. I like Deadpool. Deadpool wants to be a dark comedy. It's just not the same thing.
Or raunchy comedy.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where he'll shoot a guy's head off and then say like hoopity scoop doop and then like make a pop culture reference. And I love that. I laugh at it and it's a lot of fun, but also that's not exactly the same thing that World's Greatest Dad is doing, which is just like truly making me wonder like, God, what is wrong with myself?
Well, and it's like Dr. Strangelove. Should I be laughing at this or should I be afraid? Honestly, like I'm sitting here like this is funny, but it's not because this is too real. And like I love the Coen brothers and
they're big.
A lot of their a lot of people might not agree with this, but like when I think dark comedy, when you have a film like No Country for Old Men, which is like the bleakest of Coen brothers movies, yet I still laugh during it. And I'm just sitting there like, I don't know if I should be laughing watching this movie or not, but like they inject like little things and like there's some out and out like straight up jokes in the film, but like for the most part it's like just how somebody reacts to having death staring them right in the face, and it's just like that's basically what's happening when Anton Chigurh gets in front of you. It's just like you're looking at your inevitable doom, and yet you do stupid things and it's kind of funny.
It is the exact scene I'm thinking of where it is a comedy scene. It is a comedy script. It is written as a comedy. Is the scene at the gas station with the gas station attendant where there's a portion of me that wants to cry for the attendant. That poor son of a gun. But on the other hand, it's just brilliantly worded and just absolutely great. And Javier Bardem earned that Oscar because he is just like smiling and smirking as he's starting to eat the payday that he and he's just right in front of him smirking. Meanwhile, like I remember when the first time I saw that, I was in the theater and I was truly terrified. It took a few. It's interesting you bring up the Coen brothers because I just did a review for Fargo, and Fargo has this great way. It is a comedy where a lot of messed up crime happens, and I just see something like that where they were respectful, where Fargo was respectful to it. There was some gory crime, there was some intense crime, and then there was a comedy scene. And I think that's like a little bit of something where it's like, okay, so the gravity of the situation is still there, but there's still the goofballs of go for it.
It's just like you betcha, yeah. And just like Marge interviewing those two prostitutes. And it's like he was just like funny looking. Funny looking. I was like, just funny looking. And it's just like you're sitting there like, yeah, Steve Buscemi is really funny looking. And
I love that it's, okay, so he's funny looking. And then later on, some other guy shoveling the driveway, and he's like, oh yeah, no, he was funny looking. And I'm like, they're able to solve the mystery right there. And they just don't put those pieces together. Eventually they do, and it works out perfectly, but we're viewing from afar saying, oh my goodness, get this thing taken care of. And then the last thing you mentioned was the Dr. Strangelove. And that sort of threw me for a loop because like with Dr. Strangelove, I remember watching that in college. I watched it a million times before, but I was showing one of my roommates in college. I was watching it and I was laughing and I was having a good time. And he was watching it and he was terrified. It's just kind of like that you pull both of those levels from you. It's a treat to watch without a doubt.
Well, and because like scenes like when they all start like brawling, it's like, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. And it's just like,
it's brilliant.
Like
it's a brilliant line. Like
that truly. Line seems like it should be so dumb. but it's so smart in that situation, and it's so funny. And then like even Dr. Strangelove with his whole entire like just trying to desperately not show that like, yeah, he's a Nazi. He totally is a Nazi. And like that Kubrick is such an amazing director.
Oh my God.
And like there's nothing quite like a Kubrick film. And this is actually a brilliant segue into my next question. Because Sean, do you have a particular favorite filmmaker?
Ooh, that is really tough. Because there's something about it's an easy one, so I don't know if I'll go with it, but I'm just going to bring it up to get the conversation going. But there's something about Spielberg. And lately, it's been more of like movies by committee, but then you see something like The Post, where I went to the theater to watch The Post being like, I am ready to hate this. Let's go. Let's have something great going on. I am ready to despise this movie. And it is magnificent. And it is something where you look at him and he pays attention to blocking. When there's chaos going on in the room, when they're trying to figure out like the legal strategies or putting together the Pentagon Papers, everyone is perfectly placed there. And that's all Spielberg. You look at his old stuff and you just see something like Jaws, where it's just, oh, the shark didn't work the whole time, so we have to make the monster the uncertainty. And then I have that debate with myself and say to myself, oh, if Spielberg had money and he made Jaws now, we would see that shark all the time. And would that be a good movie? I mean, that's where it just starts to scare me, is because like there was an accident there that made it perfect, but he doesn't really like he does do bad movies. You'll see them once in a while, but most recently I watched The Color Purple and I was like, oh, a biopic about a black woman, this should go well from Steven Spielberg's hands. It should go, and it's just perfectly made. And it's not just his flourishes, it's not just his setups. And I'm on a little bit of a kick with him, but it really is just, something great. I mean, obviously, going back, you go to Hitchcock. I mean, just truly just like magnificent. I'm doing all the easy ones right now. But they're, it's tricky to, go through each one, but I admire what Scorsese does, which is very few films alike. I think that it's interesting that he's had his best decade in the teens, which seems impossible to say. But best movie, obviously Goodfellas and everything, but his best run has been recently, which is kind of magical to think about. But I mean, I'm going to name every director on the planet, so I'll stop for a moment.
Well, and what's so special about Steven Spielberg is like there's some directors, it's like they have their thing. And there are certain directors that can literally do anything. And Steven Spielberg's that. Because, like, I always bring up, look at 1993. You have Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. And you're just like, how are these made by the same person? But they are. And they're both perfect in exactly what they need to be. Because, like, I feel like Jurassic Park transcends just being a monster movie, because where like Lost World felt more like a monster movie, and like the third 100% a monster movie. It's like 90-minute monster movie. Jurassic Park has so much going on in it, whether it's like there's that sense of wonder that Steven Spielberg can inject in something, like E.T., that sense of wonder. And like look at Indiana Jones. It's a pure sense of just wonder and enjoyment, and done perfectly well. And then Schindler's List is one of those kinds of movies that's so devastating. It's like, I'm not the kind of person that needs to be in a certain mood to watch a certain movie. But boy, do I have to be in a certain mood to sit through Schindler's List, because devastating and horrifying. And like you look at Ray Fiennes in that film, just like, I'm terrified of this person right here. And Steven Spielberg has done basically anything. Like, I don't know if he's ever made like a straight up comedy that really worked, because like he has like 1941, and that definitely wasn't his best film.
Well, you don't like The Terminal? I mean, I would say Catch Me If You Can would be the one, like, of all of them.
And that's the thing too, because like Tom Hanks. So perfect in that movie. And I've enjoyed seeing some of the roles that Tom Hanks has been taking lately because like 90s Tom Hanks, usually it's just like he's just such a great guy. You just love watching Tom Hanks. And I love seeing him as like these crotchety characters though.
Oh yeah.
Because he has such great moments like that in Catch Me If You Can. And it's funny you brought up the terminal because I actually had an experience with the terminal. So my aunt used to take my brother and myself to the movies, and I really wanted to see Shrek 2. My brother really wanted to see White Chicks. And my aunt's like, no, we're seeing the terminal. And I'm just
You're like a lose right there, man.
and I'm like, because like looking back now, like Shrek and Shrek 2 are my two favorite animated films of all time. I love Shrek. And thinking that
I didn't like Shrek.
I love Shrek. And I'm like, could have saw Shrek. Terminal. And like as like a 10, like I think I was 11, it's 2004. So it was like I was 13 years old. I didn't want to go see the terminal. And like I would have to rewatch it, but I remember hating it.
Oh, it was bad. It's bad. No, it's unfortunately it's got the charm in it that it's trying to have, but I think it minimizes a lot of, like very like intense political issues and maybe that's watching it from a lens of today. But even at the time, like this was, 3 years after 9/11, we're dealing with like, politics in other countries that are going really kind of amok. And it's just like, here's a charming guy that has to live in an airport. It gets a little bit tough to swallow.
And because like you mentioned, like Spielberg has some of those moments. And like, I remember I read Ready Player One and I'm like, this book was made for me. And like, loved the book so much. And then going into the movie, I'm just like, it was fine. And like sitting there, like, I felt like I just had so many references just chucked in my face.
Oh,
and like, I didn't feel that way reading the book, but watching that film, I felt like this is just like a long string of just like, how many references can I throw into this movie? And I did appreciate the shine, like the overlook scene.
Mm-hmm.
I thought
that was cool.
Really cool, and that was inspired. But maybe it's just, I got so mad that they cut out all the references to Rush. For me personally, they're my favorite band of all time. And like, I remember reading the book being like, they're talking about Rush. And then there's nothing in the movie. I'm just like, I hate you, Steven Spielberg. You ruined this. But besides that, it's just like, it's interesting you brought up the point of like, what if Steven Spielberg had a big budget for Jaws? He had one for Ready Player One. And what did he do with it? Just throw as many CGI references as possible at you.
The fourth Indiana Jones as well. I mean, it's just one of those things where that one it gets tricky.
Just one point before I move on to the next question, but like I'm so interested to see James Mangold do this next Indiana Jones movie. Cause like, well, first off, like Indiana Jones, like how old's Harrison Ford now? Gonna be like 80.
Yeah. He's coming back officially, right? Or do we know?
Yes. So apparently this fifth Indiana Jones movie will be the last one with Harrison Ford. Disney's like, we got to milk him. We got to milk this once after we bought Lucasfilms. So, and I like James Mangold a lot. So yeah. I'm interested because like he knows how to make a classic kind of Hollywood film. Like I remember sitting watching Ford v Ferrari being like, this could have came out like decades ago and fit in so well. And I enjoyed that film so much.
The Ford v Ferrari like bring back was just such an enjoyable moment for me. Like I just absolutely loved that film existed last year and just everybody could all just get around the campfire and say, this movie's fantastic and we just need to accept that. And it was truly like one of these things where it's just like, it's old school. There's nothing complex. Yeah. Parasite was my favorite movie last year because of how complex it was, but it was cool to see Vroom Vroom and people smile. I'm telling you, it was a blast and there was nothing like rough about it.
And like, that was one of my favorite trailers recently. And them having Highway Tune from like Greta Van Fleet in that trailer. I'm just like, my God, I need to see this movie right now. Is this playing yet? And that was just a wonderful thing. Now, obviously we've hit on a couple of different aspects of film, but thinking about Sean, do you have a few, say, actors or actresses that stand out to you that are some of your favorites?
Boy, oh boy, there's just so many. But when I really think about it, I think about Denzel Washington, and because he's the celebrity actor. And I want to maybe I'll do like another one that's not as I will actually do one that's not a celebrity actor, and he's the exact opposite, and I'm excited to do it. But you got Denzel Washington, where it's just effortless. It just is really effortless. Like he could just pretty much get up there, read a script, have that powerful voice, and be able to go. He makes terrible movies or I mean, he makes terrible movies slightly palpable. I think about The Siege, where like The Siege is just like not really that great of a movie,
Mhm.
and then you just have him go off in it, and it's perfect. I think I like Flight more than most people do, but him in it just makes it impenetrable. Um, then I think about just like I just love character actors, and when I
Mhm.
see him a few times, I get really excited. And so the one recently, and his name is starting to become a little bit more known, and that's what's getting me really psyched. Is Bill Camp. And Bill
Okay,
Camp,
yeah.
he's just Bill Camp always puts everything up a grade for me. When he showed up in like the last like 10 minutes of News of the World as like the minister
Yeah.
grave digger, it was just like, oh yes, Bill Camp's in this, and he really is in quite a bit. And he kind of like this isn't a film, but when he was in The Outsider, it was sort of this perfect. This absolutely transformative performance for him where he really and all of the people had to struggle with this, but they struggle with, is this mysticism? Is this a monster here? And he was just kind of one of the people that's just like, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. And like, he just kind of like said, like, I'm open to whatever we have here. And to sort of like, it's a tough role to play, a very unknown role to play, but it was just like, just worn perfectly with Bill Camp without a doubt.
Yeah. Oh crap! What's the name of the movie? He played the leader of like a skinhead gang,
Oh my goodness.
and like he's intimidating, and like you can tell he's not one of like they're not he's not one of the ones that like spend way too much time in the gym, have tattoos all over them with their head shaved and everything, but he's the one they all listen to. And I'm trying to think if it was Skin. It might have been. I'm
Was
pretty
this,
sure it was
I
Skin.
got to look that up later. Cause if that's recent,
It was within the past, like it came out last year, the year before.
oh my God.
But and like he was in Dark Waters
He was in
with
Joker.
Joker. Yeah, he pops up in a lot of things. And crap, what the hell was I just watching? I feel like he popped up in because I've been watching Boardwalk Empire for the first time. I'm pretty sure he popped up in that. I'm like, oh look, it's Bill Camp.
What's great is I haven't watched that in forever, and it's just kind of awesome. And it's like, oh, he was in that. Now I go back and I'll look at him because he really like there's the epitome of the character actor. He was recently in Queen's Gambit. He was in
Yes.
Dark Waters. I forgot about that. The Kitchen. Good Lord. See, I just recently saw Vice. Skin. So you are right. It is
Yeah.
Skin.
He was
I
in.
won't go through the ball, but wow, there's so many.
Well, yeah, he was Gerald Ford in Vice. And that was the weird scene where they were talking about like Dick Cheney's like I'll like walk out with my out and just be like, what's going on here? And like that was Bill Camp as Gerald Ford. And that's a fun thing about character actors is like, look who it is. And it's so much fun seeing them pop up in a lot of things. Cause like I know one of the greats, like Harry Dean Stanton passed away within the past couple of years, and he just popped up in everything.
Oh God, yes.
Like he was in the Avengers. Like he was the janitor guy when Hulk fell through the building, and he's like, I think you're losing your pants or something.
Oh
And
my
just like
God.
I'm like, ha Joss Whedon's just like, Harry Dean, come in for this one scene in the
I have a feeling he could pull that off. I have a feeling Marvel wasn't able to bring that in.
So, but yeah, I appreciate it. So it's funny that you brought up Flight. You throw a little bit of John Goodman in anything,
Oh my
I'm a
God.
fan.
Oh my God. He like I think it was there was an interview that he gave on the Daily Show when Jon Stewart was the host. And Jon Stewart just starts the interview. It's like, listen, you suck at nothing. And it's the most apt description of John Goodman that you could ever have, where it's just like, oh no, he's always kind of perfect. He's always on. It's wonderful.
Because like whether it was like some of his early work with like the Coen brothers, with like Raising Arizona and Barton Fink, I
Oh,
remember
jeez.
watching that, and he seems like such the nicest guy. And then my God, that movie watching, and one of my favorite characters in any movie is Walter Sobchak
I was just about to bring him up.
of the Big Lebowski. Because like I don't think any screenwriters can quite make every single character in their movie interesting like the Coen brothers can. Like there's just all these random little characters, but like Walter, it's like Market Zero, and it's like, am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
There's just these little things that he did there where he's this vulnerable little baby way down, where he just like sat there kind of pouting saying it's a league game, Smokey, or he just like really still wanted to say like, no, I'm just going to sit here and have my coffee. He really couldn't lose that situation. Or, there's just a moment where he is looking at the bill from the Undertaker as he slowly takes off his glasses, wire rimmed around. And that's, you say that there is nothing that credit to the Coen brothers on that, but it's just something that's Goodman. That's Goodman. Like, it's kind of nuts.
And he's just like looking at it. He's just like, what's this? And I have a funny story real quick. So my mom was talking to me. It's like, you get to a certain point where it's just like, your parents are like, if anything happens, here's all of my information and stuff like that. And there's a couple of ways to react to that situation. Like my brother just gets mad and it's like, Mom, stop talking about this. My reaction was pulling up the clip from the Big Lebowski and being like, it is our most modest receptacle to just because we're bereaved doesn't make us saps. And I'm like, Mom,
is there something we could put it in?
Just gonna get a Folgers tin. And that moment where he's just like shaking and the dude's just like standing there and just like all the ash in his face. And he's just like, oh, sorry, dude. He's like, God damn it, Walter. And then the dude's just like defeated and Walter just like tenderly just hugs him. That's some of those moments where John Goodman has that range in that character.
It is probably one of the most complex characters in a Coen Brothers movie. It's not just easy. It's not just exploding. It's not just, insecure. There's kind of just like so many levels to it that it really is great to watch.
And there's just sometimes you just have that energy where it's like, am I wrong? And the dude's like, no, Walter, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole. And
something that has been posted for political arguments, like for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a lot by, many people on several different accounts.
Just like, just because you're right doesn't mean you're not being an asshole about it. Now, Sean, do you have a particular film that you feel like you could just watch every day and return to?
This is a weird thing about me. Is I am not a good rewatcher. And I should be. Mm-hmm. I need to be. I need to start doing that because when I rewatch something, it's a little bit more magical. But the problem is there are millions and millions of movies I haven't seen yet, and I have to see those first. And then, as you can see, like from my account, I do a lot of retro reviews. Yeah. And so, like, these are just movies that I go through all the streamers that I have, and I just say, that title is a movie that someone told me I need to see. That title is something they told me to see. I mean, like there's things like Barry Lyndon where it's like, oh yeah, I recently have, but I never saw Barry Lyndon. And it's like, oh, everyone has told me I need to see Barry Lyndon, so I'm going to do that instead of rewatch something I like. Now, if we're going to go to rewatching something I like, this was the big one for me. And it was one where I was feeling blue when I was in college, and it was always Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Now, very strange that a movie that where I was feeling blue, the movie that would cheer me up is where the two main characters get gunned down. Kind of spoiler alert, but learn your history. And so it is just one of those things where I just love, there's a camaraderie there that I love. There's a fun nature to it. There's two parts to this movie, and in both parts, the characters receive ups and downs. There's no darker edge to either part. Obviously, there's a finality to the like the end of it, but in each of them, they have troubles. They can help them even when they're having those troubles, when they're on a cliff and they're saying, they want to jump off the cliff and it's like, I can't swim. And then there's the moment where just Robert Redford, before like Paul Newman laughs, where Robert Redford just shows the gun, kind of waves the gun for a second, being like, okay, that's what it is. I can't swim. That's why I don't want to jump off the cliff. And then Paul Newman, of course, the iconic laugh. Man, that kind of movie is literally two movies. It's split into two movies, like with a very weird montage in the middle. But it is just something that I truly love both sides of it.
There aren't many film pairings as charismatic and full of chemistry as Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Because it's like, the great thing is like, they're both movie stars, but they both can act. And like Paul Newman, like you could just throw him in anything and he brings gravitas. And all the way up until the end, like a film like Road to Perdition, just having him there, and between having him and Tom Hanks in the same movie, Tom Hanks is playing a hitman, and you're just like, Paul Newman is so great. I think probably the movie I rewatched most recently with Paul Newman was Color Money.
Oh, yes.
And Fast Eddie, though. And it's so crazy watching The Hustler and then watching that. And because both those men that he plays, the same character, are just so charismatic and magnetic. And watching Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, they're so great together, the two of them. And see, I would follow Paul Newman. There's no wonder that they had a gang of people that followed them around. But it's a great pick. And that's the tricky thing of trying to balance watching new films and watching the things that you love. And I try to, like, for me personally, I'll watch a new movie, then I'll watch one of my movies. I'll watch a new movie, then I'll watch one of my movies, trying to find that balance. And it's funny they brought up Barry Lyndon, because shameless plugs here. Just posted an episode of my podcast with my friends where we broke down Barry Lyndon. And
oh my gosh,
for like an hour and 40 minutes about Barry Lyndon.
That would take forever to break down Barry Lyndon. Oh my God.
And it was very interesting thinking about, like, I feel like the vast majority of that conversation was, do we like Redmond Barry? Do we like this man? And do we connect with this man? And that's so interesting about it. But like, that film is a Kubrick film to a T, and it is gorgeous.
I think it's funny that you bring up the "do we like this man?" because that's just exactly why Ryan O'Neal is such great casting in that movie, because it's just really like, he's the absolutely beautiful, so you could love him right away, but he's just so beautiful that he could have that playboy sort of like fashion to him, enough to annoy.
And sure goes on some adventures in that film and goes to some bad places. Want to watch a duel?
Oh my! That duel scene. I think that was an hour of the movie, and it's so suspenseful.
There's still 3 hours of it. But now, Sean, do you have a particular film that you feel like you connect to because it relates to another interest of yours?
Oh boy, oh boy!
This is probably my favorite question that I ask.
So if it relates to another interest of mine, this is complicated because my interest is film. A movie about film. I mean, you could do a Hail Caesar, which honestly, like, no one else likes Hail Caesar. Good. Because like Hail Caesar is great, and it was marketed horribly. Because everyone was just like, oh, it's about Clooney getting kidnapped or something like that. No, this is about Josh Brolin keeping the studio together for one day. And then like Clooney's just one of the side characters. And it really was just something like just kooky and, fun the whole way through. I have it now. I have the one. Okay. It is, I watched it this year, and I was always told, since I started to love movies when I was little, that I should watch this movie, Cinema Paradiso. And I mean, man, did that movie just and you know, I watched it this year, which was like the worst year to watch it because, like, you know, literally it's about
You
saving
want
the
to go to the movies.
it's like saving the movie theaters. And so, you know, I guess spoiler alert, but you know what's going to happen if it's a film about movie theaters. But when they demolished the theater, oh God, I was just like, oh man, I shouldn't have watched this now. I shouldn't have watched this right now.
And you're just sitting like, because like the AMC that I went to the most, right by Rider University, I lived in Lawrenceville for like 6 years, and then my 4 years of undergrad, I always went to AMC Hamilton, shut down this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2020. Screw you, 2020.
It was
And
I lost there were two theaters that are, you know, less than a mile from me. One was on the other, so there was like the Bridgeport Theater and the Fairfield Theater. So literally they were separated by a river. It's weird, but it worked for us. We loved it. They you know, 2019, 2018, like they bought it for apartments, and then just now 2020 the Fairfield one went down. So when they tore down one of the theaters, I could see the other theater through the rubble of the torn down theater, and that one was boarded up. And it's just, we gotta just, oh God, I gotta get out of this pandemic.
Cinema Paradiso has one of the most cathartic scenes I feel like I've ever watched in a film, and it's that very end. One of the most amazing montages of film ever. And Ennio Morricone's score is beautiful and just captures that film so well. That's a
So
special.
funny because he knew how to just like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
He knew how to just make a wonderful score. It is just something where it's like, but what the film needed. Because, you know, there's some scores that I just really start to dislike nowadays where, you know, I'm having some trouble with the Thomas Newman scores. I think he's done some great ones in the past, but now it's just like, you know, 1917, there's a soldier walking through everything, and there's just like this like really imposing score. And I'm like, dude, just, you know, like soldier, he's walking through.
Who are
But
you, Hans Zimmer?
oh, it felt like it honestly felt like that. And Morricone just in that one thing, it's just he's doing the most subtle thing. And it's just, it almost feels like it's just a light score, a light thing. He's not doing something crazy. He's not doing something funny. He's doing exactly what, especially that moment, which floored me completely. Cause I'm like, what's in the canister? I don't know what's in the canister. What's in the canister? What's going to be on this film? And then when I see it, oh man, did I start screaming. I was like, oh, like it is, there's nothing better. Cause at that moment, it's the moment you're, you know, suppressing film and you're censoring film, and it's just, he says, like, you know, focus on those moments that you miss. Oh God, this movie is like, it's a movie about watching movies in the theater, which, by the way, I'm a tremendous theater proponent, and I truly think, and some people are like, well, you need to see the new Top Gun movie in the theaters. I'm like, I agree. I also think you need to see First Cow in the theaters. I think everything needs to be taken away. I love First Cow. Everything needs to be taken away. You need to be away from reality in a chair watching a movie theater. Yeah. Please, everybody, wear your masks. I want to get out of this pandemic.
Yes. Official sponsor. We tell you, do what you need to do. We want to go back to normal. And because that's the thing too, because like I go to the theater 4, 5, 6 times a week normally. And this past year has just been like, what's going on? And I remember my last weekend of seeing like Bloodshot and
nice.
The Hunt and that had KJ Apa in it, about like it was a faith-based film. He played
this boy.
I'm just, that was the last movie I saw in a theater.
No, mine was Onward, so I'll take it.
Like, okay.
It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I remember I made like a little crack. I'm like, hey, this is the safest place to be because no one's here. Then all the theaters closed and then we can't leave our houses. I'm friggin' idiot. I'm making jokes about this crap. But yeah, so it was Onward, and I'll take it. Like, you know, it's solid.
But Cinema Paradiso, if you love film and haven't seen that movie, do yourself a favor.
Oh, it's the best.
Now, Sean, do you have a particular movie character that you feel like you relate to the most?
I really hate that it's this. And, you know, it just shows that I don't have a high opinion of myself. But I mean, maybe I do. I don't know if you could think about it. But, you know, it's Woody in Toy Story. I I'm easily angered, easily jealous. I don't like when people have the different points of view from mine, and I don't like when people act ridiculous. And so I think to myself is that when I actually do lose my temper, I get worried that I do start to sound like Woody, which sounding like Tom Hanks is not the worst thing in the world. But that is probably, if I just think off the top of my head, it is Woody. It's interesting because in like when Toy Story came out, I was a young child and I absolutely loved Buzz Lightyear. So it's interesting that now as I grow older and I realize that I am probably
we all become Woody.
That's honestly what it is, dude. I liked Buzz because he was able to pretend and be something else, and now I'm just Woody.
Have you ever like yelled at someone, "You are a toy," and just like stop acting stupid?
I think I've yelled where my arms go back. They go up, 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 back. And so I think that there is something there where, like I'm very expressive when I yell, and I'm very like movement styled. That's not a phrase, but yes,
patent it right now.
Movement styled.
So now, what's a film that you love that you feel like people would be surprised to find out that you love?
Oh, I know it exactly, but I always talk about it, so not many people are surprised. But as a cinephile, film snob, movie critic, whatever you want to call it, Aquaman is a spectacular film. Aquaman is a cinematic masterpiece, and it's so funny where I don't know if I'm like sort of Serpico, where I've just lost myself in the irony and I don't even know what I am anymore by liking that movie or not. But I think when I saw it, I enjoyed so much about it. And I mean, of course, boy, I don't even want to say there's a stupidity to it. I mean, there is. It's there.
There's a camp to it
yeah.
James Wan knows what movie he's making, and that's wonderful. Because how do you make a super serious Aquaman movie?
It's really difficult for me to say this because I usually despise the argument of that movie knows what it was. Like, when a movie is bad and they're like, that movie knows what it is. I'm like, yeah, a bad movie. What are we talking about here? And so I usually reject that premise, but I think this is the definition of how that premise works.
Well, because the thing is, certain films know they're silly and embrace it. And I think Aquaman on some level just like, you can see the James Wan in this movie. Like the trench.
Oh, baby.
Scary.
Really good.
And you can see the camera work. I'm watching I remember when they have Nicole Kidman doing that fight at the beginning and the camera's moving along the ceiling.
Yes.
Am I watching The Conjuring? And I'm like, you can tell it's James Wan, but like, I feel like this is the benchmark for you. Will you like Aquaman? Does Jason Momoa riding a giant sea monster voiced by Julie Andrews pique your fancy? And if it does, I think this is the movie for you. And I remember, I'm like, Julie Andrews is in this? And I heard this, like the giant sea monster, I'm like, is that Julie Andrews?
I remember I didn't look it up, and I heard that voice, and I just said to myself, yeah, no, that's somebody. And I just like I was watching with my buddy, and I was just like, that's somebody. I don't know who it is, but we're gonna be somebody. I expected like somebody that like I've seen in a couple of like BBC originals or something like that. I was like, oh, Julie Andrews is the voice of a sea monster.
That whole climax of that movie, like,
oh god, yes,
like Lord of the Rings is my favorite. They're my favorite films, and like Battle of Minas Tirith is epic. And then you're watching the ending of Aquaman. I'm like, holy crap, the scale of what's going on here.
It's the Battle of the Five Armies. It's the Battle of the Five. So it is extremely Tolkien. I'm just seeing these worlds collide, and I'm seeing a bunch of crabs with an Irish accent as they're just chilling on
the top. As a giant lobster person. And I'm just like, this is glorious. And like Patrick Wilson's hamming it up. Jason Momoa is just being Jason Momoa. And like, you have Dolph Lundgren in this movie.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
and, and it's just like that movie is so crazy, and it's just a crazy fun time. I got one of those early screenings through Amazon, being a Prime member, and saw in the theater like a week or two early. And I remember leaving like, that was fun. Like, one word to describe this, I had fun watching this ridiculous movie.
And I mean, this is what introduced us really to Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. And I mean, that that is genuinely great, because now, we have him as serious actor in Trial of Chicago 7, also Watchmen, and now we're going to have him in Matrix 4, Please God, Don't Be Entitled The Resurrection.
I saw that rumor coming around. Like, could you be any more on the nose?
If it's that, I'm done. I really, it's going to be tough for me to watch it.
It's like, please don't name it with another R word. Like, are you just trying to continue?
Oh,
if that turns,
that's kind of cool. Okay, now I'm back in. It's yeah.
Sold. So my last question for you, Sean, is what do you love most about movies?
It's funny because I'll be a hypocrite on some of this, because this is not all of my favorite movies, but I really want to see the character go through a journey. I want them to, maybe they're going to be the same at the end of it, and it's just the external that will change, and there will be a comeuppance. Maybe they will be different by the end of it, and there will be a moment where they have a realization. I took it's funny that I took a screenplay class in college, and I have not forgotten about it. And it's pretty much, I just think of that 3-act structure, and I think that needs to occur. And it's interesting how sometimes that occurs in the weirdest of ways. I look at something like Before Sunrise, and it's like, well, can there be a 3-act structure in that? And it's like, if you really go into the analysis of it, which I would have to do if I watched it a couple more times, but there is something where they, take a turn. There's a moment where they're going further with that turn. There's a moment where it's completely different. And I can almost visualize that now. Granted, Before Sunrise is a couple talking all night, and that is it. But if you can have some sort of transformation takes place and our characters go through something, that's pretty much what I want to see. I don't care if it's a similar plot a lot of the times, but I just make sure that that's like my goal throughout the whole thing.
And that's the classic movie. It's like the hero's journey. And sometimes your journey is love, and sometimes you're literally going on a giant journey across perilous lands and trying to drop a ring in a giant mountain.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up, I can allow my guest to ask me a question.
Oh, no.
What is a question you would like to ask me for me to answer right now on the show?
You're at a bar, and you're getting hit on by every single Robin Williams character. Who do you go home with, and why?
What's funny is because I don't drink. So,
well, there we go. So you'll have a clear head. So that could influence the, yeah.
Who would I go home with?
And it doesn't have to be for anything inappropriate or appropriate.
I would go home with Mr. Keating.
Oh, good.
From Dead Poet Society. Because be an interesting night.
That's it. I like to throw that answer at people because it's just such a ridiculous question that I love to hear what like nutty thing you have. And man, that's a good one. That's a solid answer.
Second, Mork.
Oh,
just kidding. But my answer is definitely Mr. Keating from Dead Poet Society. Because I remember watching that my senior year of high school in English class and just being like I could only imagine making that much of an impact on my students in the classroom. And all those pieces of crap at that stupid prep school who didn't get it. It's like, all you want to do is chant freaking Latin conjugations. That's all you want to do.
I love that some kids stayed seated though. Stayed like that was the perfect thing. If every kid was standing up at the end, that's just I mean, we wouldn't have realized how great it was if just some of them were sitting though. But that made the magic there. And when they were sitting, their heads were down. They were like, "Oh, I want to be standing up right now. I just don't have those guts."
Yeah.
And that I absolutely like. I remember when they pulled out the first time I saw it, they pulled out on the shot, and I'm just like, "Oh, there's a bunch of kids sitting." And I had the same. I was like, "What the hell?" And then I was like, then later on, I realized I was like, "No, it makes the standards a lot more special." That's what I'll say with that.
The fact that like Ethan Hawke is just like,
Well, one of the kids that hated all this stuff. Like he always made fun of all the poems and stuff like that. He doesn't even have like a good arc or anything, but he's just like one of the ones that made a goofy poem, like said the stuff like, and then he gets up and stands. I was like, that's what you want, man. That's great.
Like when I teach statistics, I want people to actually care and think this matters to them. And not like, why am I learning math? Because that's the toughest thing.
There's not a lot of math teacher, inspirational movies. They're all poetry and writing and stuff like that. Stand and deliver, I guess, but
how can I help these kids? These kids. But that was the most unique question that I've been asked on here, and I loved it. So thank you, Sean.
Of course. Happy to assist.
But I guess wrapping things up, Sean, I'm going to let you shamelessly plug one last time and then wrap things up.
I love shamelessly plugging. All right, so it's going to be Math Teacher Movies on Instagram. I review movies. I review TV. I do a bunch of little fun things on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. What are they? You have to watch to find out. Watch to find out. Follow to find out. But Math Teacher Movies on Instagram. Also, the Guy at the Movies podcast with Joe and Sean. I am Sean. Joe is at Guy at the Movies on Instagram as well. And I also have Awards Watch. It's an Oscar column that comes out every Monday talking about the Oscars, and we're getting nearer to them, so it's happening soon.
When is the actual Oscars now? I'm so ready for February and being like, no, it's not this month.
It is April. The exact date escapes me right now, but it is literally going to be April because I guess their original thought was it'll be safe then and we could have a ceremony. Maybe April of 2022. Maybe.
Oh, geez. But Sean, thank you for coming on. And yes, please go follow Sean at Math Teacher Movies on Instagram. It's a great page. I check it out every day. And thank all of you for tuning in to Lost in the Wasteland and always supporting your Wasteland reviewer.